Okay, I'm going to get my blue again. I don't really care if it's the right exact color because I know I'm going to influence it later. Okay, we did water this, we did, oops. I'm going to just wet this again. So it's hard for you to see this because this is my real one. But I'm going to take some clean water. Actually, this brush isn't, I can see that it's not 100% clean. So I'm just going to come down, wetting it. So I'm going to paint above my line, like I've made a line where I want my frame to go so that I know where to paint to. I'm just going to paint around this shape. Just my clean water, only I can see what's going on here, but you're going to have to be pretty careful around the edges. So you want your paint to go to the edges, but not beyond the edges where it needs to be a hard line. And where it needs to be a soft line, you will paint right past your edge so that it will not get a hard line and you won't paint up to the water. You'll just stay within the water perimeter. Like if I don't want a hard line here, like right here, let's say I don't have enough time to go all the way around here. So you can do it in chunks. So I'm going to keep this pretty wet. I'm going to paint to here with my water because I'm going to paint in here, and by the time I paint over here it might be too dry, so I'm going to paint in chunks. This chunk, and I can see that my water is run down a little bit here, pooled down at the bottom, so just suck some of it up. I don't need it to be that wet down there. And you're going to have to just keep judging how wet it needs to be. So I'm only painting to here, but I have to be careful that when I come to here, that I don't let my colors touch this edge here where I've stopped painting water, so that the colors will just come to here and they'll bleed over to here, but they won't touch this edge. Okay. Because then if they do touch this edge, we'll start getting a hard color edge here. So you just want to, and you know, ideally, if you really want this to sink in, there is a method that I learned where you let this dry. So I do it once, let it dry. And then once it's pretty dry to the touch, I do it again. Water, and I let that dry. And then I do it again, water, water, water. But I'm going to skip those other two and I'm just going to go straight to putting some color in here. I want to make sure this, I'm putting a bit more water on here because I talked a bit and might be a little dry. So you'll have to judge. That's why I think it's good to practice. How much water is enough so that it won't dry, but not too much that it's going to be too puddly. So now I'm going to take this brush and I'm just going to start to lay in some colors. And I don't even have to make it like join it. This is going to kind of be an abstract background. I'm feeling the slant of the boards. So I'm angling it that way. I'm sort of remembering that. I'm going to take some of this water and paint off my brush just because it's a bit too watery. I want to pick up some of this pooling water. And so it's not, I don't mind that it's a bit, as long as I'm kind of feeling that angle. Although if I don't, I can correct it later even, but I'm coming around, just kind of pulling this paint around. So you see, I'm coming to here. It won't give me a hard edge. I've painted water to here. As long as I keep painting and it's wet, it'll be like, it'll just start to softly spread itself out. Now I've gone quite light here. It's hard for you to see, but I'm soaking up some more water here because it's starting to run down and pool like that. So I want to tighten up with a dry brush. I'm going to tighten up this line that I went around this leaf here, not very carefully. I want to make sure I went around nice and carefully around my bird, around this here, around the edges, just to make sure it's touching the edges. Where I want it to come right to the edge of my bird, I paint right to it. I want that to be good, but the rest here, I don't mind. It's a bit soft here anyway, so I can be a bit more, not so tight. So you can see it's, so what I'd have to do ideally is to now wait for this to dry, because if I'm going to do this in steps, this is how you'd have to do it in steps. So I'm just going to stop here. So this is my clean brush. I've just wiped the clean brush off so that I can suck up. I just don't like the way that chiseled down in a straight line. I want to angle that just a bit. And it's really hard for you to see probably. Is it too hard? Anyway, I'm going to have to, it's very, very light. So I do want you to work light at this point. I can see that this is coming straight down here. There's a funny thing happened there. I don't really want it to be straight coming down there. I do want it to be on an angle. And I think it might be because it's all running down. I'm going to just interrupt this now with my dry brush, just to try to interrupt that straightness. I don't want it to be too much of an angle. This is done so lightly in a way. It's really not like I'm going to be influencing it in the next coat. So don't worry if you don't get it right. So we'll have to wait till this all dries, and what we'll do is we'll be watering all this detail here on this side of this. There's a stalk, a wheat stalk or something, a branch growing up here. So we're going to do this branch, paint around that branch, paint around this branch, and do the inside of those shapes. But this will all be dry, and we'll put water all again, and we'll put the water over here this time, but it'll be dry, and it will have been sunken down into the fibers of the paper. So that's why it's really good to sort of do that idea that I was telling you about. Put the water once, let it dry, sort of like not completely dry, but so that it's not shimmering. Then you would put the water on again, let it dry just to the point where it's not shimmering. And then the third time you put your paint into it so that the paint really gets down inside the fibers of the paper, so that when you go to do your next levels, you'll be doing this sectional thing where you'll be painting the water again, and you'll paint the water up to here, so that when I go and put the color here, I can paint to here and it'll spread out there, but it won't touch my edge, my watery edge, so that I won't get a hard line. Yeah, and I can see this is really gone on a straight. There's a texture on this paper. There's a bit of a weave, and it probably is. And anyway, it's an interesting weave. But I can see that I'm getting this up and down thing, but it's not too far off of what this is. I'll be able to influence, and I'm actually going to just interrupt it just a bit with this clean brush. Interrupt it just to get a bit more of an angle, not too much. I don't want it to be too much of an angle. So that's fine. What happened there is fine. So that's very light, and I can build it up from here. And now I can go in and paint this side because there's a gap between here. I don't have to worry about it bleeding where I don't want it to bleed. So I can now put water all over here and do the same thing here. And this is where you really would kind of want to make sure you do match your colors. So I'm gonna, you've hopefully made enough, and you can just put this in here now. Got enough there that I can just put it in there and attach the color. But I see this interesting yellow too that I have drawn in. I don't know if I have any left. No, I'm gonna just use it here. It's over here, this yellow. I can drop some of that in too if I want, but I have to be a bit careful because this is drying a bit. But if I do put it in here, we can see what happens. There's this bit of yellow happening. As long as it's wet, but not too wet, you can keep working in it delicately. I can put some of this in here too. It's still very wet, but you're gonna have to judge, and you're not gonna know until you do a lot of this. You need to do a lot of this. Like I can't really tell you. You're gonna have to feel it. It's something you have to feel. You see this interesting yellow, and I can see it's over here too. I can put this in, whoops, I didn't do this part yet. Ah, but I could just paint it in anyway if I want to. I could come in here and put some on this side, knowing it's wet enough, and attach the two. So here I haven't wet it right, so it's going to be a hard line where I leave it. But I've taught you that secret technique that I use. So I clean my brush off really nice and clean, dry it off so I don't put more water on it. And then I come along and I knit this together with the part that I don't want it to leave a hard line. So I'm of course knitting that watery colory line to where I've got nothing yet, so that I won't get a hard line. But it has to be done while it's wet. After it's dry, you can still do it a bit after it's dry, but it's not as likely that you'll actually really fix it perfectly. It's a bit more anyway, there we go. I'm going to stop. Sorry, I should put this up higher, and I can stop the recording here.